It's the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I just learned Discover credit cards do something pretty awesome. At the end of your first year, they automatically double all the cash back you've earned. That's right, everything you earned doubled. All the cash back from eating at your favorite soup dumpling restaurant doubled. All the cash back from the trip where you sort of learned how to snowboard also doubled. And the best part, you don't have to do anything ridiculous to get it. Nope, Discover does it automatically. Seriously though, see terms and check it out for yourself at discover.com/match.
Welcome back, everyone, to your source for fantasy hockey news and daily degenerate gambling breakdowns. Thank you for joining us for the Thursday episode. We got a lot to talk about the New Jersey Devils, a special guest, that young core. What fantasy studs do you need to have from this New Jersey Devils team, and a recap of where they've been and where they headed on today's episode.
You're Locked On Fantasy Hockey, your daily podcast on fantasy hockey. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in for the Thursday episode of the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. And on today's episode, we have a very, very special guest from Locked On Devils, Trey Matthews. We're going to break down everything that you need to know about the Devils right now. And here is the gentleman that you need to be speaking to about these New Jersey Devils, Mr. Trey Matthews of Locked On Devils. Thank you so much for joining us today, man. First of all, we really appreciate having you on. How are you doing?
I am doing great. Obviously, a few weeks into the offseason now, things have started to settle on in. Obviously, there's a few question marks for the Devils going into this offseason now that they're trying to get back into the Stanley Cup playoffs. But things have been great. This season went really well for them. Obviously, a lot of positive takeaways. And, I can't complain.
Yeah, and one of those positive takeaways right off the jump for me, obviously you got Timo Meier at the trade deadline, and he made a positive output in the 21 games that he played in the regular season, as well as the 11 games in the playoffs. But that's who I want to start off talking about a little bit. You know, he's a well sought out hockey player. Obviously, at the trade deadline, after Tarasenko and after Bo Horvat went, he was the next guy in line that teams were after. He's also sought after in the fantasy hockey world. I know a lot of us want Timo Meier on our fantasy hockey team, a guy who can score 40 goals continuously year after year, improved his stats, 300-plus shots, 150 hits, 45 penalty minutes. He's a Banger League beauty if you've got penalty minutes in the fantasy league. But what I want to know is how strong you feel about Timo Meier re-signing with the Devils. I know you talked to him a little bit in your exit interviews in the postseason exit interviews after they lost in the second round. Where are you at with your gut feeling right now about Timo resigning? 50, 60%? And if he does re-sign, how dangerous do you think that duo of Meier and Hughes can be?
So here's the thing. One of the complaints that a lot of people had in the first half of the year for the Devils was that they were too soft, because you got players like Nico Hischier, Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt. They're all fantastic players, but you're not really going to get that player that's going to assert themselves, because let's face it, Hughes, Hischier, and Bratt, they're not going to drop the gloves, and they're not going to sought after someone and go off fighting. That's just not their game. They don't spend much time in the penalty box. And you got players like Miles Wood, Eric Haula, Nathan Bastian. They might do a bit of the dirty work, but at the same time, there's only so much they can do. So at the trade deadline, the name of the game for Devils was get a bigger body down there, get that power forward, get someone who can assert themselves a little bit more. And obviously, they were the front runners to land Timo Meier. I spoke to Corey Masek of The Athletic. He believes that there wasn't really another team that was really all that much in contention for Timo Meier. He speculated that it could have been the St. Louis Blues due to all the first-round picks they were able to get as a result of trading away Vladimir Tarasenko and also Ryan O'Reilly. But at the end of the day, Timo Meier was definitely the player that this Devils team needed. And when looking at his overall production, when looking at the games he did suit up in for Devils, He appeared in 21 games. He had 9 goals, 5 assists for a grand total of 14 points. And obviously the penalty minutes were a little bit higher than we anticipated. But here's the thing. You talked about Timo Meier being a 40-goal scorer. If he was to remain long-term with the Devils organization, I don't know how much higher his scoring production will go. I don't know if it's going to be somewhat consistent like we saw with the San Jose Sharks, because obviously that's a different circumstance, because with the Devils, who's top priority? It's going to be Jack Hughes. Then you got Nico Hischier, the captain, and whatever happens with Jesper Bratt, he is obviously a core piece. So the thing for Timo Meier, especially with him being paired alongside Jack Hughes, the name of the game is that we just need that big body out in front of the net, because if the playoffs were any indicator, obviously as the season progresses, you're going to get those players that are going to be gunning for Jack Hughes. You're going to get players that are going to try to get underneath his skin. And obviously Jack Hughes, while he has speed to burn, he's not a big guy. So it's easy to move him off the puck. It's easy to get physical with them. But if you pair him alongside with Timo Meier, Meier's able to get in front of the net. And all Jack Hughes has to do is just hit it weakly to him. And either way, Jack Hughes is going to walk away with an assist. And Timo Meier is going to finish in front of the net because of his physical capabilities. So the thing is, even though the scoring did go down for Timo Meier, people need to look at the hits. People need to look at the blocks. Yeah. People need to look at how much the power play improved for the Devils, because they went from 18th ranked team in the nation to 13th when the season ended. And that and Timo Meier played a big factor in that. So my thing is, like, at the conclusion of the regular season and the playoffs, despite Meier not scoring a single point in the first round against Rangers, he was able to get inside the mind of Igor Shesterkin, being a bit of a menace. He's getting those hits. He's doing the dirty work. He's making sure that the Devils are asserting themselves physically. And quite honestly, even though he's not one of the top stars at the conclusion of the first round, he was still a key X factor that the Devils needed. So I think after everything, I think Timo Meier has solidified himself as the more valuable asset compared to Jesper Bratt. Yeah. And Tom Fitzgerald being the smart mind he is. And I don't think Tom Fitzgerald has made a move that has made me question his sanity up to this point, and hopefully that can continue. Yeah. My thing is, like, I know he says that priority, one of the priorities is re-sign Jesper Bratt to a lengthy deal because he is a core piece. But given what Lindy Ruff has said about Timo Meier, given how much you knew how physical Timo Meier can be, especially in round 2 against the Carolina Hurricanes, because we saw the scoring production go up and his physicality remain stagnant, I think Timo Meier brings something that a lot of the Devils players just physically cannot bring because due to their size. So,
I saw your comment on Jesper Bratt as well about wanting to re-sign, but fully not committing to signing the contract yet. And that brings up question marks as well. You know, in my belief with Jack Hughes, and if Timo Meier is to re-sign next season and remain with the Devils, I think him and Jack Hughes, you know, talking fantasy wise, they can be both a second round draft pick, both together, just exceptional with the offensive stats. Flip, I know you want to ask something about Jack Hughes and the incredible season that he just had with 99 points. For
I most definitely did. And first of all, I definitely need Trey on this show a lot more because you're coming with the fire analysis and you clearly know what you're talking about and you're close to this team. And this Devils team is going to be, you know, at the top of the table for the next number of seasons. They are built well. We're going to ask you a little bit about maybe where I think the weakness lies in the blue paint. But I did also want to kick things off and still got a little excited, went right to the Timo Meier thing. I did want your take overall on the season because they made a big jump this year. They made their impact in the playoffs known as a legitimate threat now for that Stanley Cup. And I just kind of want your take overall as what the landscape is for this team. And maybe I'm jumping the gun a little bit because I think we knew they were going to be good. I just didn't think knew they were going to be this good this quickly. What's your expectations for this group moving forward, regardless of all the signings? Is it now cup final or bust already? Or how do you view success moving forward for this squad after the year that they had?
You know, I wouldn't go that far because obviously this is a different circumstance compared to like the Taylor Hall era, because when Taylor Hall won the Hart Memorial Trophy, obviously he was carrying a lot of the load. And obviously the Devils still had some assets that had been on their team for a while, but they were kind of washed up. So my thing is, like, Taylor Hall did a lot that he could do to try to take the Devils to the next level. They made the playoffs in 2018. They got gentlemen swept by the Tampa Bay Lightning. They were dealt away in 5 games. And after that, it was pretty much like, we got to build around him quickly. That's why you saw the trade for PK Subban. Unfortunately, that did not work out for the Devils, and that came back to bite him a little bit. But now you got Jack Hughes signed long-term. Nico Hischier, he signed long-term. Dougie Hamilton, he signed long-term. Jonas Siegenthaler, one of our shutdown defensemen, he signed long-term. Andre Palat signed long-term. And hopefully you could get either Timo Meier or Jesper Bratt to re-sign long-term. My prediction is that both of them will be with the Devils organization for quite some time. So you got your core pieces signed to long-term deals. They're relatively young. They have not hit their primes yet. So in terms of cup or bust, I would not say at this point. I'd say the name of the game for the Devils, get back into the playoffs and try to stay somewhat relevant throughout the NHL discourse. Because let me ask you guys a quick question, Flip and Steele. What were your expectations for Devils going into this past year? Like, where did you think they would finish?
Steele?
Well, I think there was obviously the big question mark in the crease because we saw last year what happened. They went through 4 or 5 goalies throughout the season. Obviously, a lot of the injuries that came into play, but Vanecek just played absolutely out of his mind this year. I don't think anyone really expected it because he hadn't had that experience before as a true starter in Washington. He split the crease a lot with Ilya Samsonov for the last few seasons. So a lot of the questions were very quickly answered by Vitek Vanecek early on. The first half of the season, he was phenomenal, obviously on that 13-game winning streak as well. So we knew they were going to be better. I think Flip and I think we had them I think I had them at least 3rd last in the Metropolitan Division. I had them being better than the year prior, but I did not expect them to finish 2nd in the Metro. I had the Islanders top 3. They just squeaked into a playoff spot, but they were phenomenal. So my expectations prior to the season, they weren't as high, but heading into next year, they're going to be a lot higher than the year past.
And it's a really good question because looking at that Metro division and how it finished even, at the start of the season, aside from Columbus really, and of course Philadelphia, that's a division full of killers. And now we're really starting to see the age though on Pittsburgh and Washington and the youth shine for this New Jersey Devils team. So I think, Trey, for a guy who covers the team as closely as you do, you're in for a real treat over the next number of years and some really exciting hockey led by a lot of the players we want to ask Trey about right after the break, including Luke Hughes, Jack Hughes, and a lot more. And of course, we're going to get to this goaltending situation, as Steele alluded to. Good regular season from Vitek Vanecek. Let's see what they can do next year with Schmid and Vanecek. Maybe run a duo out. Trey's going to let us know what he thinks about that. Today's episode is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Make a fast break during the NBA playoffs over to FanDuel because right now new customers get a no-sweat first bet for up to $2,500. That's $2,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. And Steele and I, we love betting on everything from the first tip, from who hits the most threes, and we love the promotions from FanDuel. The app is safe, secure, and easy to use, and you get your payouts instantly. No better place to place your playoff bets than with America's #1 sportsbook. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and get a no sweat first bet for up to $2,500 back. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
Hey there, Locked On listener. Erica L. Ayala from Locked On Kraken here. And I just learned Discover credit cards do something pretty awesome. At the end of your first year, they automatically double all the cash back you've earned. That's right. Everything you've earned doubled. All of the cash back from eating at your favorite soup dumpling restaurant doubled. All the cash back from that trip where you sort of learned to snowboard also doubled. And the best part, you don't have to do anything ridiculous to get it. Nope, Discover does it automatically. Seriously though, see terms and check it out for yourself at discover.com/match.
And thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. We are a part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Make sure you check out Trey Matthews, host of the Locked On Devils podcast. Yes. You can find it on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform. And Trey will continue to break down everything you need to know regarding the New Jersey Devils and their fantasy value for next season. Again, thank you so much, Trey, for hopping on today.
Yep.
For today's episode, talking about the New Jersey Devils and their future for next season. We are going to get to the goalies at the end of the episode, but I want to talk about some of their young guns. We're going to talk about Jack Hughes. We're going to talk about Dawson Mercer, but I really want to start with the prospect, Luke Hughes. Just an absolutely young, exciting player to have in the New Jersey's, organization. Obviously, it's super exciting for both himself and Jack to be playing together on the same team. You don't get to quite see this often where brothers get to play on the same team together in the NHL. And so far, from what I've seen at World Juniors, University of Michigan, and the 5 games that he's played in the NHL so far, he's NHL ready. He should be in the lineup full time next year. 87 points in 81 games in his 2 years, an NCAA champion. He's won bronze medal at the World Juniors, had 4 goals, 5 points at the World Juniors last year. What I want to know from you, though, is what should we all expect in his first rookie season with the New Jersey Devils? I kind of want to compare this to last year with Owen Powers of the Sabres and Jake Sanderson of the Ottawa Senators. What we should expect. Both players finished with between 30 and 35 points, over 22 minutes of ice time. Sanderson was really great on the quarterbacking that second power play. So how do you feel about Luke Hughes heading into this next season?
You mentioned Owen Power and all of them. I had the chance to speak with one of Luke Hughes' former Michigan teammates, and Matty Beniers, who is the front runner to win the Calder Memorial Trophy. And obviously he plays for the Seattle Kraken, who had a very good year. So Matty describes Luke as a very dynamic player, and also said that Luke was probably one of the most talented skaters he's ever played alongside with. So the thing about Luke Hughes was that I was questioning why the Devils signed him so late in the year. Obviously, unfortunately, he lost to the eventual national champion in Quinnipiac University in the Frozen Four. And there are a few games remaining in the Devils regular season. So they decided to sign him to his entry-level contract. And unfortunately, that does eat up year one of a 3-year entry-level deal. But he was able to make the most out of it because he appeared in He appeared in 2 regular season games.
Yeah, 2 regular season
and 3 playoff games.
Yep.
So here's the thing. He was able to have a great statement in his second game against the Washington Capitals because he was able to go home the champion because he got the game-winning goal in overtime. And what a way to cap off the regular season for the New Jersey Devils. A season that was already historic upon itself, and Luke Hughes gets to just finish off the season with a bang. And then here come the course of the playoffs. It's the second round against the Carolina Hurricanes. Ryan Graves goes down with an injury. Devils are in desperate need of a replacement. Obviously, do you go to Brendan Smith or do you give Luke Hughes a chance? And basically, I was like, you know what? You got nothing to lose at this point. Insert Luke Hughes into the lineup because I'll admit, I was very hesitant about putting Hughes into the lineup just because I was like, I don't want to feed him into the pack of wolves right away. But just looking at Luke Hughes and during the playoffs and also the couple of regular season games that I saw him appear in, I wish I could use a better word to describe him, but he looked very comfortable out there because he was in the right place at the right possible time. He was making great passes. He was asserting himself pretty good on the defensive side of things. I'd say his only horrendous game was game 4 against the Hurricanes because he and Dougie Hamilton, they led the team in worst plus minus. I believe his plus minus was like -4 that game or something like that. But yeah, Luke Hughes, that was his only bad game. But his debut in game 3 against the Hurricanes, his playoff debut, he was able to get a couple assists, and Jack was able to get the Gordie Howe hat trick. So the Hughes brothers took headlines that game. But his best game was game 5, an elimination game, and he is playing a lot of minutes out there alongside with John Marino. And what I saw from Luke Hughes, once again, he looked comfortable out there. He was making great passes, and not only that, he's an offensive-minded defenseman at heart.
For sure.
John Marino is the stay-at-home defenseman, but what I saw from Luke Hughes was that he was joining in on the attack, on the rush at times for the Devils, and I had to do a double take. I was like, wait a minute, is that Jack? No, is that Lazar? No, that's Luke. What's he doing so deep into the slot? What is he doing? But I remember he's not just a defensive-minded defenseman. He's a two-way type of player. And given how great Luke Hughes was able to perform during the playoffs, I think, unfortunately, this kind of signals the end of the tenure for Ryan Graves and Damon Severson, because it might be time to insert Luke Hughes and Shimon Nemeth and also Kevin Ball into everyday roles to possibly take the defense to another level. No disrespect to Severson. He's a long tenured Devils player. Yeah. Ryan Graves was able to lead the team in defensive point shares, and he was second on the team in plus minus. But unfortunately, just given how much Luke was able to do in just 5 game appearances and come up big in the playoffs, like we're talking about a Devils team that got handled with ease against Carolina Hurricanes in 5 games. And yet Luke Hughes was able to basically make sure that there was still some attention gone his way, because he had to make a big impact right away, and he was able to do that. So I'm really excited for Luke Hughes. I hope I get to see him in development camp. We'll see what happens in that regard. But having spoken to Luke Hughes, I asked him, like, what were some of the defensive changes you made to your game? Because one of the downfalls for Luke Hughes was that he gets a little too jumpy on the defensive side of things, and thus it puts him out of position, because that was one of the concerns I had for him when he was going to make his playoff debut. And he said playing that second year at the University of Michigan, he was able to make some minor tweaks to his game, and he was able to translate it from the Frozen Four to now the Stanley Cup playoffs. And like I said, right spot, right opportunity, and just making those plays.
The future is absolutely bright for this team. You mentioned Nemeth. Also, Alexander Holtz is a very intriguing name. Jack Hughes is obviously at the top of the pile. And as much as fantasy-wise, I think Luke Hughes is going to bring so much. Defensemen are a lot harder to acquire in the fantasy realm that do bring it at both ends of the ice. So Steele and I are going to have to break down that a little bit more, maybe bring Trey back. But at the end of it all, Jack Hughes, very, very quickly, before we get to the goaltenders, Trey, 99 points this season. We like to gamble on this show. We like to do bets. We like totals. We like over-unders. I don't need to hear if you would wager on it or not. But if you were to predict over-under 100 points next season for Mr. Jack Hughes, where are you going?
Over.
Love it.
Simple as that.
One major factor. He has to stay healthy.
Yes.
Because the problem in his third year was that he only appeared in like 49 games, but he was able to put up 56 points, if my memory serves me well.
Yeah.
And then just this past year, he was able to suit up in most of the games. He appeared in 78 games, but he just fell just a bit short of the 100-point threshold, but he got hurt after the All-Star game, so he had to sit out a few games. And he did go on a bit of a slump when the season was winding down, but he was able to pick it up at the right possible time. So my thing is, if he can stay healthy and play in like 80 or so games, over all the way.
That's exactly.
Don't call me crazy.
Exactly what
I think he could potentially win the Hart Memorial Trophy if he's able to put up that point total just a little.
I've said some bold things about Jack Hughes as well.
Hey, the confidence is oozing. Look, that's something Flip and I have been saying for the past year as well, is he has the ability to get to 100 points, but he needs to stay healthy. He needs to play more than 70, 71 games in a season, which we just saw him do this past year for the first time. We were just talking about this yesterday as top breakout candidates of this past year as well. Jack Hughes was number 1.
What's up, everybody? David Harrison here of the Locked On Commanders podcast. When life gets crazy, and honestly, when doesn't it? Walmart helps you keep it all together now with a little extra help from Instacart. If you need your groceries now-ish, but your options for going to Walmart are later-ish or never-ish, you can get everything you need delivered through Instacart right to your door in as fast as an hour. Skip the shop and savor more of your crazy busy life with Walmart and Instacart. Visit instacart.com to get free delivery on your first 3 orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Minimum order $10. Additional terms apply.
It was win or go home in Boston on Monday night, and the Miami Heat didn't want to go home, knocking off the Boston Celtics to advance to the NBA Finals.
There was a team that was mentally tough, ready for the challenge, ready for a battle, and then there was the Boston Celtics.
The Vegas Golden Knights are headed to the Stanley Cup Final after taking Game 6 in the Western Conference Final in convincing fashion.
This time, we're not here just to be here. I felt like Season 1, we were cool about being here, but it feels like the mission is not over yet.
And Liam Hendriks returned to the mound for the Chicago White Sox after a battle with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Welcome back, Liam Hendriks. Emotional moment. They didn't even go to commercial break when he came into the game out of the dugout.
For more on these stories, check out new episodes of Locked On Heat, Locked On Golden Knights, and Locked On White Sox, all free and available wherever you get podcasts.
We are going to get to the goalies of the New Jersey Devils after the break. I do quickly want to ask you about Dawson Mercer as well before we get to the goalies. But real quick, thank you so much for making the Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast your first listen every single day. Make sure you're tuning in Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern time is when you can find all of our episodes, as well as make sure you follow Trey Matthews, host of the Locked On Devils podcast. Follow him on YouTube and your favorite podcast platform, and follow his personal Twitter account, Trey Matt4, as well. So much to love about the New Jersey Devils heading into next year. Again, we are going to get to the goalies. Mackenzie Blackwood, what's going on with him? You know, I heard you talking about Blackwood and his future with the Devils, and, you know, Akira Schmid and Vitek Vanacek. But real quickly, before we get to the goalies, I do want to ask you about Dawson Mercer, because he had a phenomenal year as well. 7 points, 12 in 12 games or 11 games in the playoffs for the Devils as well. He's a young guy, 21 years old. He's on the last year of his entry-level contract. You know, he's coming off a season, 56 points in 82 games, 14 more than his rookie year. His penalty minutes were down. His plus minus was way up. His shots, blocks, and hits were up. He had 6 game-winning goals. But he did all of that. Every statistical category was pretty much up, and he did all of that with the same amount of ice time he played in his rookie season, 16 and a half minutes. So again, what I want to know is, how much value does Dawson Mercer bring when he's playing with Timo Meier and Jack Hughes on that second line? And what will that transcend into for dollar signs once his entry-level contract is up?
Well, I think Dawson Mercer has proven himself to be a very valuable asset to this team. Obviously, we'll cross that bridge once we get there. But the thing for Dawson Mercer is that his numbers could have been a lot higher had he been on Nico Hischier's line to start the season. Because here was the problem with Mercer. Lindy Ruff didn't utilize him correctly. He was always playing on the third line, the fourth line. He was a bottom 6 player, but he had to be given that chance to showcase what he could potentially do. So what does Lindy do come January? He promotes Mercer to that same line as Nico Hischier. And then come February, that line of Hischier, Tatar, and Mercer was very dominant, to the point when the Devils got Timo Meier, you couldn't break up that line. So it was a matter of, is Timo Meier going to play on Jack Hughes' line or maybe the third line? But going back to Dawson Mercer, he finished off the year with 56 points in 82 game appearances. And here's the thing, Mercer has not missed a game during his NFL tenure. That guy is a dog. He is a workhorse, despite like the COVID procedures that were heavily enforced last year. Somehow he was able to avoid all of it. But digressing a little bit, Mercer is just, he just has a bunch of untapped potential. And I think he's only scratched the surface. And I'm really excited to see what he could do next year, because I think we're going to have to basically shift the talking from X factor to potential fourth option for Devils, if I can say that, like become a 4-headed monster of sorts. So can Dawson Mercer someday rack up the points and maybe get considerations for the All-Star game? I don't really know, but at the same time, his potential is there, and he is relatively young. So I'm really excited to see what the future has for Merce Dog, as we like to call him.
Ooh, Merce Dog. There's honestly, as a biased Leafs fan, there's just so much to like about so many different pieces. And like I think I alluded to off the jump tray, that we knew it was coming for this Devils team. I just didn't think it was going to happen this quickly, especially with how good the Metro has been over the last number of years. But kudos to the front office. Kudos to the coaching staff as well. Players get it done, but, the coaching staff obviously deserves some credit. On the fantasy show, we don't always get to give that. But very quickly, this goalie situation has to be discussed, because I'm sure you have a take or two that our listeners need to hear, because it's looking like they run out a split next year. That's what kind of makes sense to us. That's what Steele and I have thrown out. We need to hear your take on it, because starting goaltenders, even if they're getting 60, 65% of the share in fantasy circles, are huge. if you were taking a goalie from this New Jersey Devils team next year for your fantasy team, Trey, the guy you think is going to get the more of the share, who is it and why?
I think just based on experience, it might go to Vitek Vanacek. But then again, you want to hear the situation for Mackenzie Blackwood. Had the chance to speak with them, and unfortunately, it's not looking too good. Right. I think he was asked, like, does he want to return because he's now a restricted free agent? And he says he loves the team, but he'll go where the opportunity is, which basically is a polite way of saying he has one foot out the door. He was a healthy scratch throughout the course of the playoffs. He's never been consistent. He's always either met expectations or fallen underneath them. So he's pretty mediocre. He even admits that he's never reached his full potential. And the thing is, like, you don't want to meet expectations. You want to exceed them. So
of course,
in regard to Mackenzie Blackwood, he might be gone. I know a team like the Ottawa Senators, they might be questioning for a goalie. They might be
Good luck.
We'll see. But you could trade his rights away because he is restricted. But going to Vitek Vanacek and Akira Schmid, it's definitely very interesting because Akira Schmid, he had a great outing in the first series against the New York Rangers. He was able to shut out the Rangers not once, but twice. He stepped up his game big time. He was a huge X factor as to why the Devils were able to turn around that series because they initially trailed the series 0-2. And then come the Carolina Hurricane series, it wasn't really much the same, but I don't think Akira Schmid is at fault for what went wrong because, unfortunately, he didn't really get much help in front of him. And Lindy Ruff made a questionable decision by putting Vitek Vanacek in for Game 4 because Vanacek, despite getting the win in Game 3, wasn't really all that solid. Yeah. So that's something we have to take into consideration. But
the guy is a rookie, right? Like, let's not hang too much of this on the guy. So
he's a rookie, and he had and if I'm being honest, he had no business of being put into that situation in the first place, having all that trust put onto his shoulders. And he's a great guy. I just want to say he's like one of the nicest guys you can ever talk to. And he admits he was a little nervous. And he's a really nice guy. But digressing a little bit, Vitek Vanacek, that's the thing, because it was the thing I questioned when we first got him, which was, can he produce come playoff time? Because in the regular season, he always puts up solid numbers.
Yeah.
But the playoffs, he crashes and burns. And his goals saved above expected, it was dead last amongst all goaltenders in the playoffs, which is very concerning. But at the same time, he had a very good regular season, in which he became the first Devils goalie to eclipse 30 wins since Martin Brodeur. So that's something you certainly can't overlook. But
no,
the goalie situation is just something that the Devils are going to have to readdress come deeper into the offseason, because obviously I'm hearing things like Connor Hellebuck could maybe be
I
don't make the rumors. I'm just going based on
You'd like that a little too much, I think, though, Trey.
I'm not a fan of trading the rights to Jesper Bratt for Connor Hellebuck, if I'm being completely honest, because I don't think Devils fans have learned from the Corey Schneider fiasco. But
let's not go there.
That's just me. You don't trade a forward for a goalie. But
interesting, though. I agree with you, though. They're going to have to address it at some point down the line. When I look at also the contracts, the contract situation, so it's going to get interesting.
Right. So it's just a matter of, like, do you think you want to run it back with Vanacek or Schmid? Yeah. Quite honestly, I don't have a problem with either way, but you might want to get just someone who's a little bit more experienced, maybe to back up Vanacek or Schmid, whatever the case might be, because keep in mind, Jonathan Bernier was on the team. He was on there's a name you haven't heard in a while. He was really returned like come American Thanksgiving time, but that never happened.
That's absolutely hilarious.
And now I didn't see him at exit interviews. His equipment was still there. I don't know what the situation is like for him, but I think he's played his final game in the NHL last year. But so that's my thing. It's just like the Devils, they got some questioning to do, but it's just a matter of who's available. What will it take to get this player? If it's too much of an asking price, just stick with what you got. And maybe Akira Schmid will be ready to go and be that starter. because he surprised me in more ways than one. And quite honestly, I think Schmid has proven that he has a lot more upside because he's only 23? And
he's 23 years old.
Yeah. Okay. You know me with the numbers.
Yeah, because his birthday was actually after the Game 5 loss. So happy birthday to him. But
weeks back.
But so that's my thing, which is it's going to be interesting, and it's something I haven't really discussed on my show yet. But it is an interesting thought. Do you stick with what you got, and do you go based on what happened in the regular season, and just maybe say this was an experimental year, and then go from there, or do you try to get someone who has more experience and someone who has more poise during the playoffs? But it's really a coin flip, quite honestly.
Yeah, and if they can get someone at the right price, then I won't hate it. But I think Flip and I have talked about this. We would like to see the Devils run it back with Vanacek and Akira Schmid after what we've seen. Vanacek caught our attention in the regular season. Akira Schmid caught our attention in the playoffs, so we're really excited to see what both of them bring back for next season.
Yeah, they're already playing with house money.
Yeah, exactly. So I think they're fortunate enough to run it back with those two guys. I know, again, they don't have quite the experience you want, but when you look at the talent that the Devils have on the blue line, all the prospects they've got coming up, and all the young guys they have up front in their top six, this is a really deadly team moving forward and a legit Stanley Cup contending team. Flip, before we wrap it up, do you have any final questions, any final thoughts for Trey before we wrap this episode?
Other than thanks again so much, Trey, and I hope you can come back on a lot more often during the regular season. I'm excited. We might even have to get Trey in on our fantasy hockey league with our listeners out there. But yeah, seriously, man, really love the analysis. Thank you for jumping on and honestly enlightening us about the Devils.
Thank you for having me on, and always happy to talk some Devils hockey.
And make sure you go follow Trey Matthews at Locked On Devils Podcast.
Yes, sir.
On his Twitter account, follow his personal Twitter at TreyMatt4, and of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel Locked On Devils, as well as Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. You can find us Monday through Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning Eastern Time. All three of us, Locked On Devils and Locked On Fantasy Hockey Podcast. Have a great day. Good luck with all your bets out there, and we shall see you back here again tomorrow.
Peace.
It was win or go home in Boston on Monday night, and the Miami Heat didn't want to go home, knocking off the Boston Celtics to advance to the NBA Finals.
There was a team that was mentally tough, ready for the challenge, ready for a battle, and then there was the Boston Celtics.
The Vegas Golden Knights are headed to the Stanley Cup Final after taking Game 6 in the Western Conference Final in convincing fashion.
This time, we're not here just to be here. I felt like season 1, we were cool about being here, but it feels like the mission is not over yet.
And Liam Hendriks returned to the mound for the Chicago White Sox after a battle with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Welcome back, Liam Hendriks. Emotional moment. They didn't even go to commercial break when he came into the game out of the dugout.
For more on these stories, check out new episodes of Locked On Heat, Locked On Golden Knights, and Locked On White Sox, all free and available wherever you get podcasts.
Hey, Prime members, you can listen to this Locked On podcast ad-free on Amazon Music. Download the Amazon Music app today.